Hello, how are you guys doing today? This is Brayton, and today's video is going over why Dutasteride is better than Finasteride, more effective at treating male pattern baldness or androgenic alopecia, as well as benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH for short, or enlarged prostate. Why Dutasteride is just more effective than Finasteride, and why it seems to be just the better treatment, and when it comes to side effects as well, and why it seems to be more promising than Finasteride. So first, we'll hop right on into Finasteride here. What is Finasteride? So Finasteride is the kind of main prescription that's used for androgenic alopecia or male pattern baldness here. At higher dosages, yes, it's prescribed for BPH or enlarged prostate. Typically, in general, 5 milligrams there. Sometimes it can be around lower, depends on the titration. And then for male pattern baldness, it's usually prescribed for 1 milligram of Finasteride daily. Sometimes it can be titrated, or you can take like a 5 milligram Proscar, which is like the Finasteride that's for BPH, and you can cut it in halves, and you can titrate that way. Now, Finasteride can be used at lower dosages as well for individuals who are experiencing some side effects, usually under 1 milligram daily, or sometimes even every other day, or weekly even. So, of course, this is still going to be pretty effective crushing like systemic DHT levels. Of course, not to like the 70% systemic DHT, which 1 milligram of Finasteride daily does, and the 40% scalp DHT inhibition. So, of course, it's still not as effective as 1 milligram Dutasteride or Finasteride daily. Now, for the BPH dose or the 5 milligram Finasteride daily, how effective is this for, male pattern baldness? Now, it crushes a good amount of systemic DHT. That's why it's more effective for, BPH and enlarged prostate. But it doesn't really crush that much more scalp DHT, surprisingly. So in general, it's just not that effective, even if you want to increase the dose of Finasteride, even though you would think, if 1 milligram Finasteride daily is so effective, if you just multiply it times 5, it'd be more effective, right? Well, sadly, that's not the case all the time with every single drug. So sadly, Finasteride at 5 milligrams daily even is not going to be that effective for, treating male pattern baldness for like aggressive case individuals. For Finasteride is going to work for the mass majority of people who are experiencing male pattern baldness. So people with average hair loss genetics, they're starting to lose their hair in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, etc. Finasteride 1 milligram daily, or even lower dose than that, still is going to be pretty effective for those individuals. But if you have aggressive case of androgenic alopecia, like early 20s, teenagehood, you're going to have to push the envelope a little bit, and sadly, something like Finasteride isn't going to be as effective even at the high 5 milligram dose here. Dihydrotestosterone is a hormone produced from testosterone through the 5-alpha reductase enzyme. So why is dihydrotestosterone not really important in like adulthood? Now, it is important during adolescence as well as fetal development for male secondary characteristics, but in adulthood, it just seems to be kind of like a nuisance for most individuals. Now, that's why side effects for Finasteride use is pretty low and not common, but it can still happen for some people. They may have a libido decrease or just fluctuations of libido and just sexual function. Now, why is this? Now, most of the time, it's going to be because of the increase of testosterone or aromatase activity, so estrogen, by around 15%. And there can be a fluctuation when you have, crushed systemic DHT by like 70%. For most individuals, cutting off DHT isn't going to really do anything, for it is 1/10 of what your testosterone levels are. And while testosterone levels can be from, I think, around, depends on the age, of course, but typically for healthy individuals, it's like 400 nanograms, maybe 300 to around 900 or 1,000 nanograms. And so, in general, having it 1/10 of that is dihydrotestosterone, or maybe even less at times. Having it crushed is really not going to do much. There are multiple isoenzymes of 5-alpha reductase. Now, 5-alpha reductase type 2 is typically what's found on the scalp. So that's why, and while found in other parts of the body, still have a lot of body hair growth in general when using, 5-alpha reductase inhibitor Finasteride. We'll talk about Dutasteride later, but so that's why, like, even for some individuals, having crushed DHT can actually improve performance, for you have a testosterone increase, as well as you can have more estrogen increase as well. So estrogen is very important, especially for, your cardiovascular system, neurological health, your hair too, your skin. Testosterone is like the main hormone for male virility, as well as just, anabolic activity as well. So dihydrotestosterone is really kind of useless kind of for most individuals. But at the end of the day, there's some people out there who are going to say dihydrotestosterone is important. And, there are a lot of, conspiracies out there where it's like post-finasteride syndrome, which I'm not going to say is not real or anything. I want to, disclose that. But, obviously, I think sometimes there's a lot of hypochondriacs out there that may diagnose themselves with conditions when it comes to post-finasteride syndrome. But at the end of the day here, that is just what I find and what I see on literature and my thesis at the end of the day here. I don't want to speak for anybody. If you want to comment your experience with, any 5-alpha reductase inhibitor or finasteride, feel free. But in my opinion, I believe that finasteride is a pretty safe drug, especially just for use for hair loss. But we're going to get into dutasteride and why it's better and more effective at treating male pattern baldness than finasteride. So yeah, we'll hop right on in. So now on to dutasteride. So dutasteride is prescribed typically for BPH or enlarged prostates. The 0.5 milligram dose daily, also known as Avodart, which is the common brand name for it. It is the more potent 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, so it crushes more DHT, systemic DHT. I believe around 90% systemic DHT and around 50% scalp DHT, so a bit stronger than finasteride. The 0.5 milligram dose of dutasteride daily, it is more potent than finasteride. But at the end of the day here, with dutasteride, the dose can be increased and the effects can be way better. So, comparatively to finasteride, which is the 1 milligram dose, seems to be just better in general comparatively to the 5 milligram dose daily. They're around, even though they're almost identical to the effects. Dutasteride can be titrated up to, I believe, or even 5 milligrams, but around 2.5 milligrams is where it seems to be the most effective and just best for, the dose. For 5 milligrams is only maybe a couple, like 1 or 2% like more effective, which really isn't worth it. While 2.5 milligram dutasteride is going to crush almost 100% systemic DHT and around 80% scalp DHT. Now, when you have something like that, even with the most aggressive case of androgenic alopecia, even with usually the most aggressive case, if you start early enough and you start using 2.5 milligrams dutasteride, you will most likely be saved. Now, if you have the very, 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 very low percent of people who have the extreme of extreme androgenic alopecia, now that may still not be enough, where you still have 20% scalp DHT. There can be some other treatments that be compounded as well, but I guess we can get into that a different video. This is not for extreme cases of androgenic alopecia. This is for the aggressive cases. Dutasteride, though, in general, is going to be more effective because it crushes more scalp DHT comparatively to finasteride. Now, the side effects are even very similar. They're not like, oh, dutasteride is going to cause more side effects because it crushes the type 1 and type 2 isoenzymes of 5-alpha reductase. Now, finasteride doesn't cut off the type 1 isoenzyme of 5-alpha reductase. Dutasteride is more effective at type 2 and type 1. So, of course, there may be some, thought, hey, there'd probably be more side effects with dutasteride because, well, it's crushing the type 1 isoenzyme, which usually is found in things like the skin, maybe liver and brain as well. But it just seems that the side effects are almost kind of identical to finasteride, which cuts off the type 2 isoenzyme. Dutasteride is going to be just better in general. And I mean, why not choose it in the long run if you are, I guess if you don't have if you have if you're going bald in your 40s or late 30s, and finasteride will work just fine. Or maybe if you're vegan as well, since dutasteride is in a gelatin capsule, there is really kind of little to no reason to use finasteride when you could use something like dutasteride, which is more effective. Now, of course, it's harder to get dutasteride prescribed for male pattern baldness, especially in America. So hopefully, at the end of the day here, they'll, in the future, dutasteride will be prescribed in America for, or very easily obtained in America for male pattern baldness, since it's just more effective. So dutasteride, since it crushes more systemic DHT, it is going to have an increase of testosterone and estrogen by, I believe, around 20%, or maybe even a little more even. It depends on the dose of dutasteride as well. Maybe 1 milligram or 2.5 milligrams dutasteride. But the 0.5 milligram dutasteride crushes a ton of systemic DHT, so that's an increase of, testosterone. Now, that could be in theory, hey, there could be more side effects because of maybe an imbalance may happen if you're prone to it. Now, that's a possibility, but it just kind of seems that, like, in the literature, that dutasteride 0.5 milligrams and finasteride 1 milligram daily are very similar when it comes to side effects, but that's just seen in the literature. We don't know for sure. It's not set in stone. So, at the end of the day, I think that 0.5 milligrams dutasteride is just going to be the most effective hair loss treatment for most individuals. If you have an extreme case, maybe 2.5 milligrams dutasteride. Now, some people may argue, hey, that could be less safe and there could be more side effects down the line, or maybe that could be shrinking your prostate too much. Now, it could be an argument, but we just don't have that much literature on, 2.5 milligrams dutasteride daily. But it seems to be safe in the meantime, and it's going to be the most effective treatment for people with the most aggressive androgenic alopecia who really want to keep their hair. And I believe at the end of the day, if you really want to keep your hair and it's like part of who you are and you want to be yourself without it and you just really want to keep it, I think if you have an aggressive case of androgenic alopecia, the 2.5 milligram dutasteride may be the way for you until maybe future treatments arrive, or, But yeah, in general, you're probably not going to have an aggressive case of androgenic alopecia. So 0.5 milligrams dutasteride seems to be the best 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, and especially mixed with other treatments like minoxidil too, maybe a ketoconazole shampoo, or, topical anti-androgens that help bind to the androgen receptor on the scalp, that don't make sure that DHT doesn't bind to the hair follicle, the androgen receptor in the hair follicle. That could be a thing too. In general, that is kind of my conclusion here at the end of the day. If you guys disagree with me, or if you guys have any input or anything you've seen in the literature that I may have missed, or, you guys or agree with me even, or want to add your kind of experiences and, this and that, feel free to leave in the comments down below. All the comments help the algorithm, and leave a like if you enjoyed. And yeah, I think that's all for today. So anyways, I will talk to you guys later. So.